Yes, I am.
now, now you're recording. Okay, so this session is being recorded. And for the recording, I'm Dr. Chris Wildermuth, your host for today. And if you want the slides, Dr. Washington will send a letter to everybody who attended afterwards, sending you a copy of the slides. But if you want to go in here, like do that QR code thing, you can get it here too. Don't worry if you don't get them now, because you will receive those by email. For those of you who want the SHRM certification number, you get 0.5, what is it? Professional development credits, I guess they're called. You get the number by email afterwards, and I also have it towards the end of the session. Okay, the roadmap today, what we're going to go through, it's going to be a really quick class, so, get ready to roll. First, we're going to discuss what culture means, and next, discuss some myths of intercultural development, things that not only I got from my own experience running diversity and inclusion sessions, but also from existing research. And then how can you avoid causing harm with intercultural development interventions? That's where we're going in less than half an hour. Here we go. I like to make these sessions interactive. So I'd like to invite you at this point to go to menti.com and enter the code 21694329. And Dr. Washington is also going to put the link on the chat. You have that there, right, Dr. Washington?
I just put it in the chat.
Awesome. So if you all could do that, I'm going to escape from here and go to the culture. If you cannot, whoops, sorry, I need to go to the previous one. Okay, there we go. If you can't participate in the Mentimeter for any reason, then please just enter in the chat. And what I'm asking you is to give me one word that you think of when you hear the word culture. And let's see, and Dr. Washington, if people are answering on the chat, let me know, because then I won't be waiting for responses here. The code, sure. The code is 21694329. And you can also enter your answer on the chat. Dr. Washington, you can enter it too. Same, together, and aligned. Ooh, that's cool. That's starting to come in. Okay. Awesome. All right. Look at that. Differences, people, traditions, together, same habits and behavior. Got it. Okay, once you get into the Mentimeter, I'm going to have some other questions that I'm going to be asking you later, and you can stay in the same place because we're going to continue in the same slides. All right, let me go back here. Hold on. Oops. And go back here to the slides. All right. So when we talk about culture, we are usually talking about a set of rules. A set of rules just like the rules to a game, except that the cultural rules are not written. So for example, there is no book on how to be, I told you I'm from Brazil. There is no book about being a Brazilian woman. There is nowhere that tells you exactly how many kisses you give in people's cheeks and whether you're allowed to kiss men or women and who exactly do you kiss. There isn't such a thing. We just learn as we grow up. We learn from our environment. We learn from our parents, from our friends. And you start learning what works and what doesn't, what gets you yelled at and what people are okay with. And of course, you learn it over your life. So for example, I have been in the United States now for more years than I have been alive. In other words, I have lived in the United States for more years than I lived in Brazil. And I am a dual Brazilian and American citizen. And yet, when there are some cultural tests for you to measure cultural dimensions and what's your culture and so on. And I am still really, really Brazilian, culturally speaking, even though I have been in the US for like 30 years or 32 years or something like that. So you can see how culture matters and how intercultural development matters. Okay, so here are some of the things that I learned about culture as I was growing up. Family is everything. Family includes third cousins once removed. And that's not only in Brazil, but that's also when I went to Spain. I love the city of Marbella in Spain. When I went to Spain, I had my cousins inviting the whole family. And when I say my cousins, it was my grandmother's first cousin's daughter, and she invited all her children. And I have no idea what level of cousinship that is. So that's what family means where I come from. We are interdependent, not independent. The whole idea of independence is we're more group oriented, I guess. And thou shalt not brag, which made it, from those of you who are in HR, that made it really hard when I first came to the US. I was very young and I was being interviewed for my first jobs. And I remember somebody asking me, so why should we hire you? And I'm thinking, well, I don't know. I don't know who the other people are. Who am I running against? So it's like that idea that you can't brag. It was very, very strong for me growing up. Okay, so now we're going to go back to Mentimeter, the same place where you were before. I'm having to move this thing around as I do this. Oops. And present. And we go to the next slide. And the next slide is, what did you learn about your culture growing up? And this time, one of the cool things that I love about Mentimeter or any of these tools is that you're completely anonymous. So whatever it is that you enter there, we're not going to know who it is that wrote it. So what did you learn about your culture as you grew up? Let's wait a little bit for the answers. And if anybody wants to know the code again, it's menti.com, and you use the code 21694329 for those of you who just arrived, because I think a few people just came in. Dr. Washington, is the system working over there? Ah, there you go. We express love through food. Oh, that's a good one. Family was important. Respect, but then freedom to challenge. That's a really interesting one. And if anybody wants to say something, but you would rather say on the chat, please do that. That each person can have several cultures depending on nationality, hobbies, profession, etc. Interesting. Okay. Awesome. I'm going to go back to where I was. Oh, there's one more. That I grew up with several different cultures. Okay. Ooh. Respecting the elders and being formal. I just saw one, following rules and working hard. All right. So we all learned something as we were growing up about culture. Sorry about that. Let me move on. Okay. All right, so that's going to take us to the discussion of what's myth and what's reality in terms of what works and what doesn't work in intercultural development interventions. What got me started in this discussion and this idea that sometimes you can do harm? A long time ago, when I started my career in training and development, and I'm not going to tell you when that was, I was traveling all over the country, running all sorts of diversity and inclusion sessions, and always in the airplane and in the hotels running that. Dr. Washington, can you mute? Thank you. Okay. And one thing that I started noticing is that the people who liked the session in the beginning of the session were already pretty much convinced. The people who weren't convinced of the importance of diversity and inclusion and intercultural development and relations were not necessarily convinced by the end, and that some of the exercises were actually making people more upset. And the reason that I have a picture of a doctor in there is that I'm thinking of that concept of first do no harm. That at least when you run a diversity or an inclusion or intercultural development intervention, you want to not do harm. You want to not make things worse than they were before. So that's kind of the concept here, at least do no harm. So then the question that I asked myself at that time, because I was running a program that I had not created, that I was subcontracting with another organization, is could I be doing harm with some of the practices, some of the things that we're doing in this particular diversity session? And that takes us back to Mentimeter. And I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I'm going to ask you what you think, if you think that that is a myth or a reality. So the first one, let me go here to present, is sharing demographic information is a good way to of starting to discuss diversity in the workplace. And what I'm talking about is, you may have heard this in several inclusion and diversity sessions. By 2050, the number of minorities in the US will exceed the number of non-minorities. By now, the number of children is already higher, and that is a reason why we should be discussing diversity, because of demographics alone. So should we be doing that? What do you think? I'll wait for you to answer. That's interesting. We have two people saying no. People saying maybe? Okay. And now there are 3 people saying yes. All right, here is the problem. And we're going to go into Milton Bennett's developmental model of intercultural development. And that has to do with how comfortable it is for you to work with people from other cultures. Depending on where you are in that model, or depending on how culturally savvy you are, if people tell you that you're going to become a minority, you can actually become spooked and you can become afraid. And it's not probably the right intervention at that point. So I would say maybe, for the people who said maybe, it's not a yes or a no. It depends on the level of cultural savviness or cultural development of your team, of the group. You may want to start elsewhere. You may want to start with something that is not going to make people feel threatened. And yes, depending on what level you're in, if you're very ethnocentric, you could feel threatened by that. All right, the next question is, we should start our diversity initiatives by encouraging our coworkers to value diversity. In fact, many diversity and inclusion programs are called Valuing Diversity. And that one, I'm not going to answer right away. I'm going to see what you all say, and then we're going to go into Bennett's model of intercultural development. So now I have 3 yeses and 1 maybe. Okay, now 3 maybes, 4 yeses. Okay, so hold on to that one, whether we should start our diversity initiatives by encouraging our coworkers to value diversity. The next one is, our diversity initiatives should start by helping people find connections. So it kind of goes like that. Let's find something in common. Let's have conversations to discover what we have in common. Oh, now we're having some agreement. So that one, I'm not going to keep the suspense. I'm just going to tell you that that works really well. I wouldn't stop there. If you stop there, then you're not going deep enough. And let's face it, there are differences between people, and we do need to understand cultural differences and differences in experiences. And there are all sorts of types of diversity that I'm not talking about here. We need to understand that people are different, and that matters. I remember early in my career that we used to call diversity the differences that matter, and I think that's still an important definition. However, early on, people may not be ready to go straight into differences, and finding connections may be helpful. So again, it depends on at what level people are. But depending on where, considering my experience and the research on where most people are when they go into these programs, that is a really nice place to start. Okay, so let me get out of Mentimeter for a moment and go back here into my slides. Okay, and we're going to go into the part in which I'm going to share some ideas on how you can avoid doing harm, and I'm going to go through the model, Bennett's model of intercultural development. So first, about Milton Bennett. Who is he? He is an American sociologist. He is the author of the developmental model of cultural sensitivity that is very, very well known and very old. I'm not presenting anything that is brand new. This has been going on for a while. It's a very old model, but it is still very valid, and people are still not considering it. There is an assessment based on Bennett's model. It's called the Intercultural Development Inventory by Dr. Mitchell Hammer. So you can take a baseline of where people are in their intercultural development. And here's what Dr. Bennett says. Intercultural sensitivity is not natural. It's not part of our primate past, nor has it characterized most of human history. Cross-cultural contact usually has been accompanied by bloodshed, oppression, or genocide. So when we talk, earlier I asked you, should we ask people to value diversity? Of course, that's ultimately where we want them to be. But we need to understand that that's not where most people are going to be in the beginning. The concept of fundamental difference in cultural worldview is the most problematic and threatening idea that many of us ever encounter. That may sound strange to those of you who are here, because if you are interested in the session to begin with, it's probably not a threatening idea to you. The thing that we need to understand is that it's threatening for a lot of people. And if it weren't, we wouldn't be seeing what we're seeing in the world right now. Okay, so the idea that people can value differences is a very advanced concept, which goes back to my question. Should you ask your colleagues to value diversity? Should you call your course Value Diversity? Are you talking about a single course or a curriculum? Because if you're talking about a single course and people, as measured by the IDI or whatever assessment that you use, are not ready, they are not going to be ready for that kind of concept. It's too advanced for them. It's kind of teaching trigonometry to people who don't know algebra yet. According to Bennett, there are various stages where people can be, all the way from ethnocentric to ethno-relative. In the ethnocentric stages, there are a couple of stages. One is isolation and the other is denigration. In denigration, differences are literally threatening to you and scary. And what can happen if you go straight into demographics, or let's talk about how different we are, is that you could actually get people more entrenched in their positions. Most people, and that's according to my experience and also research that I looked at, are in the stage that Bennett calls minimization, in which the idea is, well, differences are not that important anyway. And that's where starting from finding connections is good, but you need to take them further, because differences are important. They do matter. So when I say finding connections, my husband and I and a colleague of mine in diversity development, we used to call that conversity, finding connections via conversation. Great place to start, or to work with people who are in the middle of the road like that. So what? Specific interventions work better for specific stages. So for example, oh, I don't know what happened here, that my thing didn't show up. It doesn't matter. So specific interventions will work better for different stages, right? In early stages, when people are in denigration, or they are really nervous about differences, they're nervous about cultural differences, or people who have different backgrounds from them, the idea is differences are bad, or differences don't even exist. So for that group, you know, like in the diversity field, people make a lot of fun of organizations that run celebrations and dinners and intercultural parties and whatever. I would say you definitely don't want to stop there. But if your people are in denigration, that's a really good place to start, because then you start associating diversity and different cultures with something fun. Are you going to stop there? Of course not. If and when, I should say when instead of if, you are to the middle of late stages. In the middle stage, differences don't matter. That's what Bennett calls minimization. In the late stages, differences are important. We value differences. We respect them. Then you want to go into deeper discussions and curriculum, and now you want to go into the valuing differences, and you want to take people into road trips to understand different cultures and so on. That's where you start getting deeper. So some recommendations: measure people's stage of development. So measure before you start, get yourself a baseline, and there are various assessments you can do that, or you can do some simple qualitative understanding of where your people are before you go. Design interventions that match where people are. And if you don't know, you have no way of knowing, it's better for you to start with the connections building before you go into the deep stuff. And remember to first do no harm. I had to go through this very, very quickly. I can send you more resources afterwards, but this was just to, I guess, I can't think of the American expression, but just to put a bug in your ear, I guess, that when you talk about diversity and inclusion, it sometimes pays off to be patient. All right, so the last question in the Mentimeter is, what will you do with the information you got today? And let me go here. What will you do with this information? Let me present, and let's see what people will say. What did you get from today? Share the information with others. Use them in multicultural environment. By the way, we will send you the video, so if you want to share the video with your colleagues, you can on the slides. To make quality connections. The simple exercise is just to ask people, try to get as many things in common as you can in the next 5 minutes and make it a competition. And that is a lot of fun. You can't do any harm with that. Celebrations, you can't do any harm with that. Less could be more. Not everyone is at the same place in the topic. Absolutely. And I think one of the dangers is that because those of us who are in the field of diversity and inclusion are passionate about the topic, then sometimes we forget that the other people are not yet. Maybe we'll get them there. Okay, so let me get out of here and back into the slides. This goes so fast. And please, Dr. Washington is going to send you a link to an evaluation. If you could please complete it, we would be most grateful, not only because we're trying to improve this program, we're going to start it again next year, but also because that is a SHRM requirement when we offer professional development credits. And I think that's all I had. And miraculously, I finished on time. I was pretty nervous about that today. Please feel free to contact me if you wanted more information or if you want resources or have questions. I absolutely don't mind. I'll be happy to share whatever I have with you. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me stop sharing here.